Here's a fresh, original script for Corporate Crimes that covers a truly underreported scandal, the use of major corporations in the illegal orchid trafficking trade, a billion-dollar eco-crime with deep ties to money laundering. Title: The Orchid Underworld, How a Fortune 500 Company Laundered Millions Through Rare Flowers. Description: The global illegal wildlife trade isn't just about rhino horns and elephant ivory. The most lucrative and secretive black market is actually for plants, specifically rare orchids, and in 2019, a shocking sting operation revealed that a major agricultural corporation was at the center of a multi-million-dollar scheme to smuggle endangered species using fake labs and fake invoices to launder cartel money. Tags: corporate crime, white-collar crime, orchid smuggling, money laundering, environmental crime, documentary. Script: in a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of Miami, a routine customs inspection in August of 2019 turned into one of the most bizarre busts in FBI history. Inside a shipment labeled agricultural research samples from Peru, officers didn't find cocaine or cash. They found 300 tiny, potted plants. Not just any plants. These were Cattleya maxima, a species so rare and so protected that a single cutting, just a single stem, can sell for $50,000 on the black market for $10,000. But the real shock came when they traced the shipping manifest. The consignee wasn't a shady back-alley dealer. It was a subsidiary of a publicly traded Fortune 500 agri-tech company. The label on the box read, Phytogenics, Inc., and that is where the story of the Orchid Underworld truly begins. This isn't a story about a simple plant thief. This is a story about how a legitimate billion-dollar corporation allegedly used the legal framework of agricultural research to launder money and traffic endangered species. It's a scandal that exposes the dirty secret of the $200 billion illegal wildlife trade, that plants, not animals, are the biggest victims, and the perpetrators are often wearing suits, not safari gear. Today, we are pulling back the foliage on the Orchid Underworld. To understand the crime, you have to understand the obsession. For centuries, orchids have driven men mad. In the Victorian era, orchid delirium swept the wealthy elite, with collectors funding expeditions into deadly jungles to find a single, unique bloom. But today, the obsession has gone corporate. There is a specific orchid, the Paphiopedilum rothschildianum, known as the gold of Kinabalu. A single flower can sell for $5,000. A whole plant, legally certified? Impossible, because since 1975, the CETA Treaty has made trading wild orchids illegal. Every orchid sold at a garden center is supposed to be lab-grown or artificially propagated, but the demand is insatiable. Rich collectors, hedge fund managers, and even tech billionaires in Asia and the Middle East will pay absurd sums for a wild orchid because a lab-grown one is like a print of a painting. The wild one is the original. Enter Phytogenics, Inc. This wasn't some mom-and-pop nursery. Phytogenics is a legitimate player in the agricultural biotech space. They specialize in developing disease-resistant crops. They had real laboratories, real scientists, and real government contracts. And according to the Department of Justice indictment, they had a side business. The FBI alleges that between 2016 and 2019, a senior executive at Phytogenics, a man named Dr. Alan Rourke, created a research partnership with a network of poachers and smugglers. The scheme was elegant. Phytogenics would send a research team into the cloud forests of Ecuador and Peru. Legally, they were collecting soil samples and leaf litter for genetic analysis, but the real cargo was hidden in the field notes. Poachers would deliver rare orchids to the team, who would pack them in sterile containers labeled as common tissue cultures. Back in Miami, Dr. Rourke's lab would register these wild plants as new strains developed in-house. But here is where it gets dirty. The fraud wasn't just about the plants. The money trail runs deep. Investigators discovered that Phytogenics was also using this orchid trade to launder money for a Colombian drug trafficking organization. They called it Operation Bloom. Visualize this. A drug cartel has $2 million in cash. They can't deposit it, so they give that cash to a middleman in Bogota. That middleman buys a collection of rare, wild orchids from a poacher. The poacher gives a fake receipt for horticultural supplies. The flowers are smuggled to Phytogenics. Phytogenics then buys the collection from the middleman via a shell company in Panama. They pay the cartel. Now, The cartel has a check from a Fortune 500 company. Clean money. The orchids, they end up in the private greenhouse of a billionaire in Singapore who paid $400,000 for the privilege. The sheer arrogance of the operation is stunning. In one intercepted email, Dr. Rourke wrote to a smuggler, "Don't worry, we are the good guys. We are saving the gene pool. The paperwork is just a formality." That paperwork was a fraud. They were creating fake CITs export permits, using algorithms to generate false propagation dates, pretending the orchids were grown from seed in their lab when they were ripped straight from a tree in the Amazon. The FBI sting that brought this down wasn't focused on plants. It was a routine money laundering investigation. They were tracking the Colombian group and saw payments to phytogenics. An undercover agent posed as a rare plant collector from Dubai. He offered Dr. Rourke $3 million for a specific type of black orchid, which doesn't exist naturally. Dr. Rourke accepted the contractually agreed to source it from an undisclosed wild population. That contract was the smoking gun. The raid on the phytogenics facility was filmed. As agents entered, they found a vault, a climate-controlled room filled with over 1,200 specimens. Many were dying. They had stripped the roots, packed them in newspaper, and shipped them like cheap cargo. The irony is brutal. This saving the gene pool had resulted in the death of hundreds of endangered plants and the destruction of their natural habitats. When the story broke in early 2020, the stock of phytogenics dropped 30% in 1 week. The company claimed it was a rogue employee, but the evidence suggested a culture of greed. The CEO, James Wexler, resigned immediately. He has not been charged, but the company paid a $50 million settlement to the Department of Justice to avoid prosecution for negligent supervision. Dr. Rourke is currently serving a 5-year sentence in a federal prison. When asked by a reporter why he did it, he reportedly shrugged and said, "It was easy. No one cares about flowers." And that is the chilling takeaway from the Orchid Underworld. We obsess over the poaching of charismatic megafauna, the tigers, the elephants, the rhinos, but the illegal plant trade is estimated to be 3 times larger, and it's flown under the radar for decades because it lacks the visceral horror of a dead animal. But the damage is just as permanent. So what can you do? It starts with skepticism. That incredibly rare orchid you see in a private greenhouse or at an exclusive auction, if the price is ridiculously high and the origin is vague, it is likely stolen. The corporations that enable this aren't just evil villains. They are often the most boring, respectable companies on your stock market. They use the shield of research and conservation to do the exact opposite. This case proves that the line between a lab coat and a criminal record is thinner than a petal. The Orchid Underworld reminds us that every time you hear rare, you should ask rare or stolen. Subscribe for more corporate crimes content.